What makes you happy?
Be yourself, be positive. Just another mindset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast, the show that inspires you to change and live a more exciting life. My name is Ishmael, and each week I bring to you a relevant conversation, message, or topic that will not only entertain you, but help you to change towards a more meaningful and satisfying life, individually and collectively. Let us get inspired and embrace collective changes for the better. In today's episode, I talk to Pletsch about the climate crisis, the real estate and construction industry in particular, and what all of us can do to change something. We talk about how Paul became a nature person and what motivates him lately. We also discuss why Paul decided to leave a steep career in real estate in order to follow his dreams, and we discuss the role of policy in regard to shifting towards more buildings using wood instead of concrete. Paul talks about decentralisation and using natural resources that are sourced nearby, and how conservatism can sometimes harm innovation and freeze entire industries. We also discuss positive changes about the mindset of people entering the job market, and you will hear what Paul wishes to have learned much earlier. We talk about new leaders, role models of the 21st century, and open innovation, and what we can learn when talking to each other if we want to achieve great changes. I'm excited to share with you the information on what is needed to create a green fee token from scratch, and we learn how that is connected to the inception of sustainability roughly 400 years ago. We look into changes that must happen to reach the vision of a more interconnected and green future, and how we can unite forces and develop all together. Finally, we talk about pushing against other people's opinions, and what role friendship and mentorship can play. And we discuss how important it is to surround yourself with people who support you, and what power it can have to start traveling. And with that, yes, welcome, Paul, to the Just Another Mindset podcast. I'm very happy to welcome you as a guest today. And my first question would be, how do you feel today and what's on your mind?
I feel really great. I was looking forward to talk to you, to be invited. How do you feel?
I also feel really good. It's always great to get to know more about exciting life stories, and even more so to share those interesting journey also with the audience. So I'm super happy to have you as a guest on the Just Another Mindset podcast. And yeah, I'm joyful and happy, I must say.
Nice to see you again.
It is indeed. And yeah, what's on your mind today, Paul?
Today, I was really happy that it rained after 3 weeks because I like the saying, sun is nice for humans, but rain is also nice for the nature. And as a nature lover, I'm really excited when it rains after a few weeks and our plants have a chance to store some water for the summer, because it's still March. It should be way more wet, but it hasn't been. So hopefully it will rain some more days in next weeks.
Yeah, we just had a little pre-talk, and for everybody that is not fully aware, Paul is based in Frankfurt, and I believe that it has been very sunny for the past 2 or 3 weeks, and you went for a walk. So maybe we actually use that as our first segue, if you want to tell us a little bit what you experienced.
So I made a hike in my hometown, that's near to Luxembourg in France, in Germany. On Sunday, a 30-kilometer hike from the morning to the evening with a good friend. And we invented that talking hikes during the pandemic because normally we meet 3 or 4 times a year to go to a festival or a motorcycle race or anything. And then we invented hikes to get together and talk a lot about how situation in personal life and in the world changes. And that's one of my best buddies to talk about bigger changes in in the world, in the history, in cycles, and it was good after the newly things that happened in Europe or that happens in Europe to talk with a person that I trust a lot and who's also studying a lot of things, but in a completely different way. And it's always nice to match with different knowledge on different parts of that. And yeah, we made a huge hike, and the forest was very dry. Everything was very dry. We talked to a farmer on the way, and he was telling the same. It's way too dry for March. And after that, we wanted to have a little bit ice cream, but unfortunately, there is no ice cream left, no pistachio ice cream, because everything is too expensive, even in Germany now. That was a little shock in quotes, but everything else was very nice to be with him again and to have the talks.
And you said that you are a nature person, Paul. What makes you a nature person, or what makes you say that?
What makes me say that? So I was a lucky kid to grow up on the landscape with a dad who works in forestry. So every Saturday after school, my mom drove me out in the forest to him, and I made a lot of wood with my grandparent and my dad, and we built our houses out of our wood. So I'm connected to the forest since I was little. And after my school, I learned carpenter, so wood making craftsmanship. And I really appreciate to work with a natural resource. And also mountain biking, hiking, like every 3 minutes, I try to get out of the city and be away from civilization. And that's really hard here in Frankfurt because it's like 6 to 8 million people in the greater area. So even if you're in the forest, you hear planes, cars. And for me, it's not the escape that I search on a Saturday or Sunday if you still have civilization noises around. So I really appreciate to be in the Alps and be more away from civilization to relax.
That's for the vacations, I understand. Okay, so from a very early age, you spent a lot of time in the forests and in nature. How come Paul still lives in the big cities? How come Paul still lives in Frankfurt?
There comes a point in life, so you go to school, you make an apprenticeship, and then there comes with, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 is a big question. How do you get money in your life and how do you get enough money? So you go to another school, study, and then you get a civil engineer in my case. And yeah, then you think with beginning 20s, okay, what's the biggest next career chance? And that was Frankfurt at the time. Real estate was booming. So I got here. I'm here now for 10 years. And after a few years of just pushing hard, I realized that I got more away from myself. So I started to realize if you don't get the nature back into your life, you won't be happy, because it doesn't make you happy if you're surrounded by concrete all the time. And it's nice to earn a little bit money, but in the end, I noticed my body and my mindset needs way more nature. So we wanted to install that more by getting on the weekends more directly to the Alps and not doing small trips here around. And that led me to another thinking: why don't we get more green in the cities? What is a big question about that, and what is the issue why we don't do that? And when I started to think about that 4 or 5 years ago, it was like an outsider meaning. And now you hear it, thanks to Fridays for Future, way more, that we need more green to cool down the cities, and there are more programs by the cities to do that. That's really nice to see that people got on the street, protest for something, and really made it change. It's not completely changed, but the mindset of the politicians started opening for that, and that is a huge success already, I think.
So just to summarize that, so you finished high school, then you did an apprenticeship or you learned to be a carpenter, you did an apprenticeship, and you went into real estate, and you went to Frankfurt, where, from my understanding, you had a pretty steep career in real estate for the past 10 years, and you have started fairly early to look into innovative, more sustainable concepts for cities and for building projects. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say it's residential and commercial buildings. And that's a big issue. I had the great opportunity to meet Hubert Romberg 2012, and I call him the Elon Musk of the real estate industry in Europe, somehow because he invented a new building system with his company Qui, where he matched wood with concrete, which was completely not thinkable of, but he did that and said, okay, we have to rethink buildings because the building industry makes nearly half of the amount of waste on Earth and 1/3 of the CO2 production. And so we have a huge responsibility and also a huge chance to capture a lot of CO2 in our buildings. And he started that 2012, and I had the chance to build the prototype as a internship during my studying. And there was like a little thing in my head since then that said, okay, there has to be more, there has to be more. But real estate industry, they laughed at such stuff up to, I think, 2019, 2020. It was you and your wood. It's ridiculous. You never will build something in wood. And now we're discussing like building high rises in wood in Frankfurt as well. So it changed all in 2 or 3 years, starting with Greta on the streets. It's really interesting to see how fast an economy changed their mindset. But actually, I think it's more because the European Union changed the taxonomy. It's not that the people internally think it's better. They're forced to do that, but I don't care how the people got there. It would be nice if they really appreciate it, because then the effort would be more greater to do things faster.
No, absolutely. But I understand that you basically say that politics actually plays a major role because they changed taxonomy, they implemented rules so that real estate and construction is basically forced to go greener, I'm just gonna call it. And therefore, like many big companies, people would argue with that, but are good to adapt to new rules and create business models. So this is what you see, that the politics is going the right direction.
Yeah, I think it was a really smart move by the European Union to say, okay, I think they thought a lot about how to change economy. And they got directly to the finance and say, okay, if you want new credits, if you want new money, you have to have a little scoreboard, and it's social, it's internal governance of the companies, and it's to be environmental. And when I worked in residential and the city said, oh, you have to build a kindergarten. And we say, oh, no kindergarten. Oh, it just costs money. Now, as it's the case, there are especially funds that just invest in kindergarten because it's an asset class. So it's really amazing to see how things change. And I think it was right to go directly on the finance side and not like, please do that. No, if you need more money, if you need more credits, you have to do it in a better way. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that in a better way. And I think it's better to get things that a lot of people can benefit from it, and not only the property owner or the investor. And I think it's also more sustainable for the investor if people are happy in his building and be there more often, or try to be there, or go to the office. It's better for the company. So a better building has a better value for its inhabitants, but also for the investor, because it's asked to rent it out. And that's, I think it's a good thing to change thinking and to start a better economy that's more resilient at the end.
I'm interested, who decides how construction or a real estate project, I think we should differentiate those, but still how a big project is being realized? Who in the end decides, okay, we go for the concrete only, we go for the wood only, or we go for a hybrid approach? Is it the investors? Is it the company that's built it? What is the process to decide how a project is being realized?
So it's mainly the investor. The city politicians can say, okay, on this plot, I like to have a wooden tower or anything. But in the end, it's negotiations. And so far, the city politicians and the city authorities said, okay, that is a way I want to look at something. How do you build it? And but nowadays, it's very interesting. I'm in a project for a huge or worldwide customer. And they wanted to rent a new building, and it was complete concrete. And it's not built, so it's in the planning phase. And then the customer come, so the tenant, and said, okay, we have worldwide new regulations. Can you do that? And then the investor said, okay, my dear planning team, what can we do? And now we're in a process to make it more green. So we already have 50% in wood of the construction. And now we are trying to do more in cradle to cradle, to think in a sustainable way. What is with the end of the building? What do we have to do to get the resources at the best? And that's really interesting to see that the push or the pressure comes from the tenants. So the tenants of big companies says, okay, if I get a new building, I want this, 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 and this, and the investors have to do that. And that is from both sides now, from the finance side, from the government side, from the tenants. And luckily, the investors I know, they're very open-minded for that and say, okay, I have the honor to work at this project. And they say, okay, it's like a study. We try as most as possible, and then we will adopt that on all our other buildings. So it's really interesting to work with the people with an open, they don't say, okay, I want to go there, but think open, and then we will look at the end if we can afford that or if we can produce that. It's very interesting phase right now in the industry.
No, it certainly sounds like an industry shift even. And again, a follow-up question, it would be interesting to understand, is that something that's happening in Frankfurt? Is that something that's happening in Germany? Is that something that you mentioned the European Union before? Is that something that's happening in Europe? Or is that even something that's happening globally, if you want to say? So just to understand how big of a change, how big of a shift is that?
So the change is really globally. So my insights are more German-based because real estate industry is a very local business. That's unfortunately why I don't speak English so often like you do, because my industry is like really an old-fashioned white man German industry. But we see worldwide, especially Canada is really on top of that with wooden buildings. In America, I don't have that insights. Even China is going to do that, because also China realizes if we keep building in that speed, we need so much resources we can't even afford, or we have to buy the completely world market out. And we see it now with the crisis, with the war in Ukraine. I don't want to say crisis in Russia. That's that's the wrong narrative. We are running out of steel. We're running out of so much stuff, and now we're coming back to the thing, why don't we use natural resources that are given in our own country? And that's like, we are spilling deglobalization right now, but not in a bad way that we don't want to make trade with someone. So, but we are forced to see, okay, what are the resources we have? And the more deglobalized and more regional it is, the better for the climate it is, because we don't have the transport energy. And in the last 2 years, we had a lot of wood export to China and America. And that's like, I can't believe that we are doing that, because we cut trees in Germany and put them on a container to China. That's not sustainable at all. Even if I like that they need wood to build in wood, but the more regional process would be way nicer.
Before we dig a little bit deeper and check out a little bit construction with wood and really what is your expertise, also what you do today, what is other different more sustainable or more green trends if you think about construction? I think there's quite a few buzzwords out there. There is circular economy, there is prefabrication. What are things that you see happening either in Germany in your direct environment or also on a broader scale that are happening and that you also support and appreciate?
The biggest learning in the last 10 years was, we made that prototype and we had interest from all over the world. So one of my interesting jobs during the internship was doing construction site tours. And there are people from Norway, from Canada, from America, from South America. And I was studying mid-20s and I said, okay, wow, we had a world revolution. So everybody was happy with that and said, oh, how nice was that build? And really that's a system of the future. And then nothing happened. We built a second one and it stopped. So there was a small ones, but the next big one was started in 2019 in Berlin, and then a year after in Erlangen for Siemens, really big building. And the first learning is, okay, you know that something is good and the industry knows that as well. They don't change it because it was 10% more expensive. And we only looked at it with the calculating costs, but the way we think about calculations and costs changed in the last years because we understand that the cost, what it is to build, is not the real cost, because the environmental costs like CO2 or what you have to pay on energy to build that stuff, that was way too cheap, and we didn't make a value to that, what the nature costs are, and that is changing. And so that was a prefab wooden building, and what's the last starting 2017 2018, the German, Austrian and Swiss wood industry started build massive fabrics. So the capacity grows since 3 or 4 years, and that is covered by politician will, but it has one thing that still stops us, and that's regulations. So we have on the one hand politicians that say, hey, you have to build everything in wood. We really like that. And on the other hand, we have very strict regulations, what you can build in wood and how do you have to build it. And that's, to say it frankly, it's not completely scientifically based. It's a lot of interest group based, and the wooden industry is like, I don't know, 1% against the concrete industry, and nobody in the concrete industry really has an interest to do more stuff that we grow, because that is on some parts an easy thinking that you don't work together, and if the one grows, your profit will go down. I see it differently, because we can grow together and we build a lot of stuff. But that's a huge point, and that's really 10 years ago it was hard to understand that there is something that can really change something, but there's not a real interest to put it in place right now. And it's nice to have it, but yeah, we know it's good, but the other things are also fine. So, and that's, we're a little bit lame in that processes. On the one hand, on the other hand, people say that conservatism makes our economy so successful. I see that different, but discuss with older people in the industry.
So I hear that it's a very traditional industry and that you still have major decision makers in big companies or in very powerful institutions that are used to the way of working that has worked for the past N years. Let's call it 10, 20, 30. I don't know how long it really is. But then I also hear that there is a younger generation coming up that basically wants to change things, people like you. And in preparation for this podcast, I read the Green Startup Monitor 2022, which is basically a report on startups that use green business and ideas. There's a lot of clean tech in there. And that one mentioned that there is specifically 3 industries that are lagging behind, and that is construction, that is real estate, and that is the financial sector. And I thought that's the perfect segue for us. And you may choose to use it for your very personal change process, like why are you moving into a startup world? But you may also use it to discuss those three industries and discuss this generation that's coming up. But I found that very interesting. I don't know what you have to say about those three industries and the report.
Yeah, it's I was not surprised. Really not. So to say something upfront, so it's really hard to change things in our industry because our projects run for 6 to 8 years. So if you make changes in between, so you have to build the building how you planned it 6 years ago. So that's for an excuse, that's fine. But we have to start to think now about new buildings. What you said about the generation, I think it's a completely society change. It's not only in our industry. So what I see, people that are starting the job right now that are really interested in sustainability, they also want to make money, but they're not that career focused that we were after studying. Definitely, I'm not planning me out. First goal was getting high very, very fast and do whatever, not whatever, but a lot of things that was on the way to get there. And for me, it was in my personal way to get an acceptance in society and to be, because we were trained, I think all our childhood in schools, if you're an engineer, wow, if you're that, wow. But nobody asked, do you really want to do this? It was like being in society, being leveled and being accepted by society for what you do. And the most German question is, what are you doing? How much do you earn? So how much do you earn is not a typical German question, but like a medicine makes that, an engineer makes that. Oh, really? So, oh. And I even have that in my family. When I got my first project leader jobs, there were people like, oh, do you want to come for coffee? So you didn't invite me for 10 years, but but now I'm fine. Okay, thanks. No. And not in my direct, but in my second family with uncles. And I think that is a mind change. What I really appreciate that the next generation, and it's only 10 years or 15 years, they're really different in thinking about that. There are still people doing, like, I don't know, want to be investment bankers or anything. That's fine. We need them as well as real estate and brokers. But the mindset changed, and that is really a pleasure to work with these people, because they go on the evenings and they didn't learn it in university to build sustainability. They do it on their own. They regroup as Architects for Future. I worked with them last year. It was really interesting with a lot of people, and it was inspiring. That there is a new movement. When I think about my school time, like I was protesting once, I think, against Edmund Stoiber 2005. That was like, we didn't want a Bavarian chancellor, and he was very conservative, but we didn't thought about much about environment. So in our childhood, there was like big cars and everything, and we didn't even think about that. And but my dad always was interested in that with wind energy and everything. So we knew renewable energies, but still that was not a sustainable way to live at home. So you say, okay, we have to make our energy green, but the resource question, I didn't understand up to, I don't know, 5 years ago. And also to talk about population, what more people need more resources, and to scale that up to the next 30 or 50 years, and then to start, okay, what are we doing in our Western societies? What is with Africa? What is with Asia? What is with the booming countries? They also need stuff, and where will the resources come from? Because we only have one planet. And then I started to also read Club of Rome and things that started 1972, but that was not on my mindset. And even in geography or in biology in school, we didn't mention that. I don't know if you heard that stuff in school or in university, I'm lucky to have that with my N20s or 30, but I wish to have learned that earlier. Is that a saying? I hope so. So I'm really looking forward in a positive way, because there's a lot of people coming, and we have the special situation in Germany, but also in the most Western societies. We have a huge demographic issue. So the next 10 years, we will lose like 20% of our construction workers, architects, planners. So we have to be smarter and faster. And I think new technologies will help us with that. But also there's a lot of change now in who is going to be in charge. When 20% leaves an industry, there has to be new people that comes up, and hopefully a lot of them understand what the issues of the 21st century are. That's my hope. So there are huge risks and huge opportunities on the other hand, and I think we have to go on that positively and work together. And that's also something I learned from Hubert Homberg in that case. So he shared his ideas, and he told me 2012, like, copyright is for losers. So it's not good if you have a really nice idea that could change the world, but you don't talk about anybody with that. So you can't change the world with your idea because you don't share it. And so he made a license system for his construction system, and now I think it's 12 or 13 countries already, and everybody is developing it further. So there's one company in Japan, they make it earthquake safe. The Canadians make it more fire safe above 10 stories. And then they share it on a platform. Okay, I made this measures, I made this measure. And so a system can grow worldwide without that anybody loses something, because on his home market, he is still the only one. So, but he shares this internationally. And I think that's the right answer to the global questions we face today.
No, absolutely. And this sounds, at least 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, like fairly innovative thinking, right? That we have like sharing ideas, that we share innovations, and that we as a team, as a global team, can develop ideas and improve ideas much faster, right? I mean, if Paul has a cool idea, he can go and work on it all by himself, and he's going to make progress. But if he involves another 9 people or another 9 countries or another 100-something countries, obviously it's much faster. So I think that certainly does make sense. What is other innovations or other innovative thinking that come to mind if you think about him as a person in particular, or if you think about those 3 industries that we mentioned before?
So construction is, we talked a little bit, getting more wood, getting more sustainable with the concrete. Concrete is not per se bad. So the Romans invented concrete, and it's very sustainable, because if you go to Rome, or even in my home region, there are a lot of Roman buildings, so they last for 2000 years. And if something lasts long, it's the most sustainable way. So it doesn't help if you build something in a bridge over a river in wood, and it will destroy after 10 or 20 years because it was built bad. So sustainability is always a long-term perspective. Real estate is the biggest issue right now, that the prices got so expensive that most people can't afford a house anymore or a flat. So we have a tenant country already, but it's getting worse. And I think there's a lot of social questions, not only in Germany, I think all over the world, how housing can function. It's a state, someone who has to support people with housing, or is it more like a private economy stuff? And that is a big social question. And I think also what we are seeing right now, and what we are seeing in the last years, there are people on the move of different reasons, because of dry areas, because of hunger, because of war in different areas, not only the Ukraine or Yemen. So the world's history is always a changing history. And so we always have to adopt cities. Cities will grow, a lot of landscape will go down. And it's not only that the villages got emptier. You have a lot of infrastructure problems if not enough people live somewhere. And so that's questions we face in the real estate industry. And what was the last? Real estate, construction, and
financial industry.
In financial industry, I think we have to rethink perhaps the last 40 years in finance. I'm definitely not a communist. I'm definitely for free markets, but I think we overextended some stuff since 1982. So I'm definitely a fan of the stock market. But I think we had a little bit of too much turbocapitalism, which put some people in a very good place and a lot of people in a very bad place. And I think we can all work it out together and all have fun and have a good life if we start to share a little bit more. And I think it's not important if you have 1 billion or 2 billion. It would be fine with 20 million as well. And
I think you can make a proper living with it.
Yeah, everybody has to decide that for himself. But I think that is a way we started 70 years ago with social market economy. That was our goal in Germany. That worked well up to the 80s. And then we freed the market in Great Britain, and I think Reagan in America, and the stock market exploded. And that's what makes me a little bit anxious. There's so much virtual and paper money around that I don't know how sustainable is that. I'm a more Austrian guy in that way. And so that a lot of changes right now we have to face. But on the other hand, I think we have a lot of money and a lot of credits right now. If we invest them right, that could be a chance as well. So the only question is what we do with that money, and not just put it in the market, put it with a wide hint in the market and say how you want to do things. And that is what I mentioned earlier with the taxonomy of the European Union. I think that was a great move to get like road signs where money has to flow.
Yeah, and let's use that as a segue or to shift gears a little bit. I like that you look at it as big opportunities, right? So we talked through those three industries. What is maybe their history and why do they stand where they are? Which opportunities do you see? And you choose the outlook, if it's 2 years, if it's 5 years, if it's 10 years, where can things develop and where would you like things to develop?
Oh, that's a good question. On a short-term perspective, we have, I see that we start to make things right and we reach the right things, but we haven't done enough to put it on the street with regulations and with laws and everything else. And my wish would be that we don't forget about all the things that face us with climate over Corona and now the war, that we still stick to our plans that we made in a society and also in the governments. But in the long term, I think in 5 or 10 years, and also don't understand that wrong, also that war, as evil as it is, can be a chance for renewable energies and to get more resilient in our own economy and pay more attention to local resources and to get back to more locally produced stuff. Corona showed it because of a worldwide pandemic and stuck supply chain. Now we don't get enough resources out of Ukraine and Russia and other countries. So perhaps it helps us to get the turbo in a new, greener future. That's my big hope. And I don't think it's unrealistic.
And what is this new, greener future that we are, or that you are picturing, regardless if it's going to be there in 2 years or in 4 years or in 6 years? I think you already clarified that there's a mindset shift of people working in the different industries. But what kind of business models may or may we not see in the upcoming years if we talk about a greener future? I think we talked a little bit about the greenification of the grid. I think electrification is a big one, and we have seen quite some changes over the past 10 years. Also talking about renewables, there's still a long way to go. Another industry is agriculture and food. I think we also see big changes. Again, there's still a way to go. But what is other advancements or business models that you can picture or you see happening in the near future?
So what we try to create and to tell people in my projects or in the whole industry is to give resources a value. So what we right now, as an example, you build a house for a tenant and he's leasing that for 10 or 15 years. So the goal was 10 years ago, that building has to be repaid after 15 years, but it's still there. And then you can make really money out of it because every rent is like running to zero. So, but nobody asked, how is the house demolished? What is the value of the assets that is in the house? And that's a point where we try to change the focus. And luckily, we have a neighboring country, which I really love, the Netherlands. And they started, I think, 2018 in Maastricht with a governmental place. And they said, okay, 3% of the whole investment value is the stones in the house, the wood in the house. And we really show that in the calculations that there is a value of the stuff that we build the house with. And that is the first things that people change their mind. Okay, yeah, the house is more than the rent. And that's the thing. I hope we go there. And I think we have to ask ourselves more, is tax only on profits, or should tax more be on how sustainable you live? And I don't talk about if you drive an electrical car or you drive bike or a diesel. I don't want that discussion on a personal level, because I think the industry is a main important thing to change the level, which is way higher than on personal level. I appreciate everybody that goes by bike to work. And it's nice to have fresh air in the morning. So even in Frankfurt, it's very nice to go by bicycle. And also that changed in the last 2 years. We got new road signs and a little bit more protection. It's still not much, but you still have to fight every morning with some car owners, but it's getting better. So the thing we really have to talk about is how the industry can do that in a bigger way, because that's the level which we have, and put value to stuff that counts. And what counts is resources, because we only have one planet. We only can grow 2 or 3 times a year wheat or rice or natural resources. So we have to handle with them, and we have to ask ourselves questions. And that's very important for Western societies that are way more rich than other societies, because if the world market, like now with the war for wheat, is collapsing, so we don't notice it here. Perhaps it gets 10 or 20 cents more expensive for us to buy wheat products, but there are people in especially East Africa that can't afford it. So there will be a starvation, and it's like a historical, I don't know, it's a really bad parallel. It's the Ukraine war, it's a Homolodor, not in Ukraine, but in East Africa, because of war in Ukraine happens, and we sanction Russia. So we have to think more globally about that, because it's not that our wheat products or our pizza place has problems to get his stuff. No, it's a global problem. And so we have to reduce ourselves so that all can have more. And that's, I hope the thinking is going more, but especially in crisis, the first things is for most people to look at themselves, their family, and then other people. And the last 2 years were not helpful in sharing economies thinking.
I do agree. It would still be interesting if you say, okay, we have to look at industry problems rather than at personal contributions. So how do we scale? How do we make full industries more sustainable? And you talked about the projects that you are working on yourself. So what is it that you work on currently? You said that you want to put a price basically also on resources, on carbon. What is the contribution that you personally work on at the moment?
Right now, on an initial coin offering for a green fee token, we call it. So it's a token that represents 1 ton of CO2, but saved in wood. So every token represents is a natural backed currency for 1 ton of CO2. And that has a background that there are studies that we can reforest 900 billions of hectares in the world, with getting along with cities and agriculture. And that's the size of America, roundabout. So that's one point. We have to reforest a lot, and we have to protect our forests. That's especially in the rainforest a big issue. It was an issue before Bolsonaro, but after Bolsonaro, it was like putting, like, I don't know, gasoline inside, because he really pushed people to do that. And my thinking is that it's also in Europe. So don't get me wrong. It's not only a South American problem. We have like Romania that loses 1% of its forests every year to illegal losses. So I ask myself, the people that live there, they do that to pay their rent and have food for the family. So we have to get a concept to give them money to save that CO2 in the woods, and to make them the forest sustainable. But they won't do that without money. And we have a big issue with the northern half of the world that's more rich and produces way more energy and way more CO2, also historically. And then we have the south of the world that has the natural resources to capture that, but don't have the money to don't use the forest. So there has to be a more justice system for that. And that is why we invented a token and said, okay, what can you share all over the world without having dollar or ruble or yen issues? So we took the modern way for currencies and leveled that with a token, that everybody in his country can rechange to his national currency. And that was one big issue. But the other issue is we don't have stable political systems all over the world. But what everybody nowadays have is a smartphone and probably a wallet. So I don't need a banking system to send you a token. So you can do that wherever you want in the whole world, and we both can send the farmer our tokens, and then he can decide if he trades that into dollar and buy something on the internet, or if he trades that in his national currency, or if you're looking now to Russia or Turkey with a big inflation, perhaps it's a storage system for him, because he says or she says it's okay to have the token because I can do it in euro or in dollar, and I wanted an independent currency for all people all over the world, which will trade in that green business. And that was the basic idea, that it's available for everybody and useful for everybody. And the opposite side is what happens right now with big state programs, but it's also controlled in that systems that perhaps don't give 100 euros out of 100 euro to the farmers, and there will be a lot of losing in institutions and anything. And our way was to do it more directly, to support the people directly.
Okay, understood. So basically on a high level, it is that you guys created a token that me as an individual or an institution can buy and trade with other people and other institutions. And which represents 1 ton of CO2, which is again represented by actual trees. And is this trees that already do exist, or is that only parenthesis, is that trees that will be reforested, or do you not distinguish between those two?
No, it's both. So we distinguish between those in one way. We don't say, okay, you have a forest and you get 100 tokens for your forest. No, you have to subscribe to our program that says you have to sustainable harvest your forest, and then you get the tokens. And that's an old German invention from 1713 by Karl von Karlowitz. He invented sustainability. The name sustainability is from him, because in the 1800s they noticed in Saxonia, if they keep hitting the trees like they do now, they will be gone in 10 years. So they start afforestations. That was the first time we digged a lot of coal out of the earth, and we need a lot of wood for that. So they said, okay, you can't get more wood out of your forest, then it will regrow in the same year. That was the start of sustainability, like now 400 years ago. So we were in that dump in the end of the Middle Age. And that is what we try to force now. That's completely in Germany and Austria, I think as well, in Swiss, I think as well. That is traditionally what we did, but we face another problem because we lost 2 world wars, and the winners took a lot of our forests after the Second World War. And then we built a lot of monocultures. And with the climate change, or with the warming of the earth, we lost a lot of that in the last 3 years. So we have the chance, on the other hand, now to build new forests, but nobody knows if it will be 3 degrees or 1.5 or 4 or 5 in 50 or 100 years. So you have to diversify a lot, and it's a big gamble. So nobody knows how the weather is tomorrow, and so we have to gamble with that. And the biggest issue so far was no one really wants to invest in forest because it's a lot of uncertainty. There's fire, there's wind, there is a lot of biological stuff, bugs that can destroy a whole forest. So the people saw only the value of the wood as a construction wood or as a furniture wood. And our approach is to say, hey, there's way more that wood can do for you. It's like it cleans your air, it gives you oxygen, it stabilizes your water system. So it's like the ecological system devices of a tree, and we want to give them a value as well. So it's not only the wood you can use out of the tree, so the trees make much more, and that is a value we want to give nature. And we think if a lot of people worldwide say, okay, I see that the same way and I want to invest in that, it's very hard right now to buy CO2 certificates. You can spend money to plant trees, but I researched the market for the last 3 or 4 years. They're very good programs. They're very programs I would see very critical because, yeah, they plant trees, but before there was a rainforest, they cut it down, and now you're paying for replant the rainforest. So let's save the rainforest, gives the people money, and in the long term, like really in 10, 15 years, when that system will work, my big fantasy, goal, whatever, is that people go on holiday with their family in a country where they perhaps already purchased token from, and that there is like a camp where you can get education about the forest, how important nature is for your lives, that forests are our lungs, and that there will be a worldwide community of education about nature, because that's the way more important parts than financial sorts is we have to acknowledge in ourselves that without nature we are not here. And we have to get more value to appreciate that. And it's not God-given that nature is every time there. And that is what a lot of Germans realize right now in the last 3 years. There's forests since they were a child. even if they are 60 now. And now that forest is gone. And they understand, okay, it's not the forest, it's not just there. We really all have to do something that it will be there for our grandkids, or we will have to do something right now that saves the rainforest, that saves. And it's not done by buying chocolate with a nice sticker on it, sustainable. No, you have to ask the right question. And it's not okay to buy, it's okay to buy chocolate with that plants a tree. But let's go to the industry and say, okay, your power of chocolate, your bar of chocolate makes 0.5 tons of CO2. Please invest that in a forest that will save that. And that is a big issue. I think we have to start with the personal stuff and the personal purchase of the tokens. But I already had lectures last year in Klimabeirat. That's a very German word.
Like a climate council.
Climate council of the city, thank you. And people start to understand that we have to change something. And so my big issue is real estate is a really big industry with a lot of money in it. And I made calculations and wrote a letter last year to the city minister, to the city, yeah, and to some real estate actors here, and said, okay, if you give me 1% of your investment costs, I will complete your buildings. And my big approach is that every building has its own part in the forest that says, okay, this building is like this parcel, and this forest makes or absorbs so much CO2, the same amount the building costs. And that is the link between the forest and the building. And that is my big goal, to bring people there to get the value of the nature in their heads and try to start to invest in that. And 1% is, with the raising costs right now, nearly nothing. And we shouldn't forget, because of all the actual crisis, that what will help us in 5, 10 or 25 years.
No, absolutely. And I really like this vision, and I also really like this goal. If I would ask you, what is the 3 things, and probably it's not an easy question, but what is the 3 things that must happen so that we can reach this vision of people being more connected to nature, number 1, but also of the goal of connecting the real estate industry more with regreening their processes? Is there 3 things that you would say come to mind that must happen, that should happen, that you wish to see happen?
Definitely, we need a change in education. I have a lucky nephew. He goes to the Waldkindergarten, so forest garden. He's happy every day in the forest. But I think it's 1 to 5% of every child in Germany has a chance to go there because they're really small. For him, that's completely sure with 3 years that forest is very important. But when I think about normal kindergarten kids in Frankfurt that see 1 or 2 trees in their place, we have to get that right down, not only on the kids but also on grown-ups, that we understand simple biological stuff. So I don't know if anybody is aware of what forests do. I don't know. It's the same thing with cooling in the city with green stuff. People got more and more distracted from the natural habits. And I think we have to relearn that. And one personal thing about that, my grandmother and my grandparents made their own potatoes, and everything was in the garden. And it was a pleasure as a child to be there, to eat fresh peas and everything fresh. So, but with the generations of my parents, everybody was got to the supermarket, and it was you had both were working, so you just bought stuff in the supermarket and you forgot about doing your own potatoes. And I think we are going back now, to stuff our grandparents used to do. They were perhaps also more war-driven, that they had starvation and anything. So they really were more, okay, I have this in my basement and I can survive a whole winter with, perhaps not the most delicious stuff, but I will survive it. And I think there's a movement also in the cities with urban gardening, and we try to learn against stuff we our grandparents knew. That's for me very important to be able to survive completely by myself on a biological level. What food means or anything to know how to do stuff. Just so education is one big thing, and so I think education you have to do that also on television, on YouTube. So you have to put it in what people are looking already, and it's not like mandatory to go to school once a week. No, you have to put that in programs. And like I had a thinking last year, because I'm a huge hip hop fan of the Frankfurt hip hop scene, to write a letter to my favorites, Chilo and Abdi, and ask them to write a letter, to write a song about importance of forests. So I will do that when the token is out. Just write them, perhaps they read it, I don't know. But it's the biggest use culture. So try to get the biggest leverage. And they have such a streaming horizon. So we have to do it on all levels to reach the people.
So basically get the seeds out where you can expect a harvest, right? So basically in school, if you teach people from 8th to 10th grade, that is maybe good and important as well, but maybe the youth is not listening as much in those years. But if you actually approach them via YouTube, via the internet, via soon maybe Meta and Web 3.0 or whatever it may be, that this has the greater chance of a bigger change if we talk about education about it.
Definitely. So that was the first question. Can you repeat the second one?
Yeah, I basically wondered if there's 3 things that you would wish to see happening in regard to realize your vision. You said the first one is definitely education.
Yeah, that people are aware. Second one is, so the big issue is I talk to a lot of forest owners who want to mine the tokens in their forest, but we have a legal issue. So the German state counts the CO2 negative emissions of all forests in Germany to themselves without paying for that. And that's a big juristical issue. And there's a threatening now from the state, because I'm not the only one who does that. There are companies in Frankfurt already that offset the emissions nearby. Everything fine, everything good, and I'm happy for everybody that helps us going on that track. It's not my personal financial or anything interest in that part, because it's a question of what will help us to survive the next 100, 200 years. So everybody welcome to fight that fight with us. And I don't get it that a state suppresses personal and company efforts. So you freeze the market, because like last week, one of the governments announced to the forest owners, yeah, if you do that with a private company, you can't do you can't get any further payments by the state anymore. So people are afraid now. People are afraid now because they don't know what to do. And I would wish me from the governments, if they are good initiatives, support them. Yeah. And speaking personally, I tried to get a credit for that. And the bank didn't even got it. They didn't got it, and it was not in the range. In the first speaking, they said, "Oh, with that education, what you're doing, everything is fine. You will get the credit." And now I get a negative decision on that, because they didn't understand the concept. And yeah, we phoned twice about that, but I think that's the uncertainty also by the regulation right now. Can you earn money with that? But that was not our question. We wanted to bring things on the way, because we are talking 12 years now in Germany to make that by the state, to give people money to let the forest grow more, but nothing happens. And then there is a personal initiative that will say, okay, we will do that and we have the money, and it stopped again. So I would wish me more reliable circumstances in the political world for that. But on the other hand, I think politics is getting more and more in the background if we get more digitalized. And we are talking from Germany to Sri Lanka. I have friends all over the world, you as well, and we send us tokens or PayPal. And so I think, yeah, so we are getting more independent, and that's a good thing, because good things can go easier from the hand if we work together on that. So less regulations, more educations. So that's the things I would wish me, because money is enough there, I think.
People just need to know where to invest this money, right? Super interesting, Paul. One other big bucket of questions I have is, now we talked a lot about the construction and the real estate industries. We talked about the wonderful projects that you are working on and that I see great success coming your way. What motivated you to change quite a bit about your life? And I do not know exactly if there is a big correlation between the two, but if I look into your LinkedIn, I believe in 2018, you have an entry that you are a traveler on the Silk Road for 3 months. So if that in fact is a moment in your life that you say that changed something, you may use it. But the main question is, when and why did you decide to go into all those great sustainability topics that you are busy with right now?
So I think it's 3 phases. It starts 2012. I got in touch with that sustainable stuff. Then I went to Frankfurt, and people adopt to their colleagues, to their bosses, and I did that as well. So I drove like really big cars or fast cars, and I didn't give a shit about how much gasoline it would take. It was like more horsepower, the better. Then I had the lucky chance to met a lot of nice people in Amsterdam for 2 years on every weekend or every second weekend. And that was a way more interesting culture and way more mind-open culture than Frankfurt. Frankfurt is very business-like. You're there to make business. Everybody is there to make business. There are some locals. Sometimes you see them. But most people come here to make money. And that's the mindset. And Amsterdam was way more international, way more different mindsets I met there. So that was before the travel. And then we decided 2018 to make a travel. I finished my first big project. My girlfriend finished her master's studying. And so we decided to make a big travel. And before 2018, I made a like normal 1 or 2 weeks in Europe, but nothing with different societies, nothing to learn. Canada, 3 months was to learn English after my A-level, but nothing really that pushes you in a new way. So we made the decision to get to travel the old Silk Route from Tehran to Beijing. And my biggest fear was, because I never had that in my whole life since I went to school with 5, and every holiday up starting with 13, I was working, doing my while I'm studying, I was working as well to finance that. So I never had like 3 or 4 weeks without any things to do, and that was my biggest fear. So I said myself, you have to write diaries and to think about how you can build a new or better place afterwards when you're coming back. So I gave myself a little bit workload with me. And then in Iran, I saw the first bridges that were built over dry areas, and I talked to people and saw that 3 or 4 years ago there was a river and it was gone, and that happens all over the travel. So I realized, okay, the climate or the warming of the world is way more further than you notice that up to 2018 in Germany. And on the last part of the road, we were lucky to travel the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam by motorcycle. And there were so much bambus. And I said, okay, it's going fast, so it can save a lot of CO2. And then I started to draw my first concepts to put like little pallets, Euro pallets with bambus in the inner city, where the CO2 is on like crossings where the cars produce it, to save that there and then find a useful sense for the bambus, a destination for the bambus. Also Amsterdam again, I found a company that makes furniture out of bambus, that makes parquet out of bambus. So I started to talk to them, but first went back to a normal job in Germany that was offered me before the travel. So I did that. But only for a few weeks. And then I got back to my old company from Austria that had the first big project, and I had the chance to build one of Germany's largest wooden buildings. So I took that chance, and working there, I realized how much energy now is possible in the real estate industry, how much change is possible, and started to invent in the end, what is the token right now? That people take responsibility for their actions, for their buildings. And to do that, they need an easy way. And that is what the token will represent. And so we start that like 2019, 2020, started to change myself to get more and more sure about you have to do that, and no matter what your boss thinks about that or everybody else, you have to do that because you're really sure about that. And then I had the luck that one good friend of mine and my last boss that I had before I made myself self-employed, they understand that I was really harsh on that, and they like 2 or 3 evenings a week I sat there and make calculations and thought about how can you make money out of that, not for me personal, but how can you make money for the forest owner, what can you sell. And that was like a process for the last 2 years and a lot of discussions, and like I don't know how many meetings I had with my old boss, and he said, that's shit, go back, calculate new. And I was so frustrated. Sometimes I let it for 4 weeks, and I just dropped it and I said, okay, I stop it. And then you lay there in the bed and you think about, and then I stood up often, very often in nights and made notes. And then the next evening I sat there again in Excel and calculate on one building, calculate from 1 hectare forest for one landowner, how can we. And I really have to say thank you to these two, to my old boss and to my best friend here in Germany. That really pushed me. And the one is at a big consulting firm in a very high position. And even he took his time out of a normal week and leveled me for 1 or 2 hours. And then I was really devastated after that when someone like that is ready with you. And also for my boss, because he saw, hey, it's really important for him, and I see the chance, and he took his time, his personal time, and leveled me and put me forward, and called me 4 weeks ago and said, hey, how far are you with this wood thing? We want to invest with our company. And that was like, okay, like 2 years you said, okay, no, but now the real estate industry changed, and they had a board meeting, and somebody said, yeah, we have to do the with forest and tralala. And he said, okay, I know a guy. I call him, and now I'm in 2 weeks I'm there with the board of the company and can present what we are doing. And that was not even thinkable last year. That was not thinkable. I left the company and everybody said, it's a crazy guy with this forest. And now they call. So that's very good internally, but more important than internally, it shows me that there is awareness, awakening.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that's a big shout out to those two, a big shout out to you, of course, as well. And it's really nice to see that there is, in fact, a change happening. If you use your own story, what is your recommendation to each and everybody listening if they find their passion? I'm just going to call it their passion or their calling, whatever you may want to name it. But what is your advice for people?
I have to confess that I always thought that books about personal involvement and how you get better are pretty dumb stuff that people write to earn money. I thought that really up to 2020, and then there was a pandemic and you had a lot of time on the weekends. And then I was fortunate to read Napoleon Hill. And that really changed a lot. And after that, I read Ray Dalio, one of the greatest living men, I would say, and watch them on YouTube, watch how the economy works. One of the best 30 minutes you can invest in your life. And Napoleon Hill taught me, or tells you in this book, if you have a dream and you are really willing to put all your effort in it, and you don't ask the question of money, because money is a side product of that. And that was completely like mind changing, because I didn't ask how the company will work and find. We still even don't know that exactly. We're not sure. We don't have calculations if 1 million tons will make us that money. That was not, and that was also with my colleagues now, really important for me when we met, that they understand what's the goal. The goal is building forests, and we have to live out of that. And if it's going a good living, fine. But that was not the goal. They earn their money in blockchain industry and Bitcoins, and my money in real estate. So that was really nice to meet people that has the same thinking about that, or accept my thinking and accept my way to run the company. Don't think it in monetary wise. Think about how can you help. Perhaps it's not all about helping, but I think if some product can help someone, then it's probably a value that will be asked for. And most importantly, thanks to people that support you and that believe in you. And that was even in my family in friendhood. There were a lot of people supporting that and accepting that I'm sometimes also very away with my thoughts, because I had that focus on we really have to change, and that is also not always an easy time for everybody around you when you invest so much of your personal time in a thing that doesn't even exist. It exists on a few sheet of papers and in your mind. It's such a pleasure to talk with you about that. And it's very simple. If you're really aware of this, and one big thing about that, I got self-employed. And the big goal is to really roll that out. And I think we will get there in the next quarter. So in up to June, we will be there. But don't rely on that. I made some expert stuff to earn money this year to cover my personal life, and have to have the freedom to still think in the evenings and on nights, or today at 12 or 2 o'clock on a Wednesday to talk about my stuff, but don't rely on it. So I don't have the pressure that it will work in April because I'm done with my money or anything. So I make it double or triple right now, 2 jobs, and the third job is to push that. And hopefully we can reduce one of the other ones. And I can put my full effort talking about that and finding people investing in it. That is also our goal in with my colleagues that will invest with me or found the company. We decided that the next goal is to find enough money to put that on a larger scale and as our hope main enterprise. on that part, because we are all aware of the importance of the stuff.
Wonderful. No, that's a really good learning that you share with us. Believing in yourself, getting into acting, I would call it, on the topics that you really do care about, because nobody else will solve it if you don't solve it for yourself. And yes, also taking a risk, but depending on your risk appetite, a calculated risk, and do not make yourself dependent, right? Because otherwise you just jump out of your everyday job. And if you are sure, or if you're certain that after 6 months you will make enough money with it, what happens if it's not the case in month 7? And yeah, that is a wonderful story, Paul, that you share with us. And I really want to appreciate you for doing what you do. And it's wonderful that you share your story with me and with the audience, but it's also wonderful that over the past few years, I would say, we grew quite close together, and it's really nice and interesting to see you doing all those different projects you do. I can only imagine how many it is. You're always busy and you're always doing the great and good stuff. So thank you for that. Keep on going. And I have 3 questions that I ask each and every of my podcast guests. But before we do that, Paul, is there anything that we have not covered for today? Is there anything that you would like to talk about before we go into a final round of questions?
No, I want to thank you. I appreciate the same. Shout out to all the wedding guests out there. That brought us together, and it was also the Netherlands again. Really a lovely country, lovely people. And one thing, start to travel, start to get to know other people. And if it's not possible to travel right now, or you think it's not possible during the pandemic, get on the internet, get on Zoom, and there are a lot of buddy things that you can connect all over the world. I know people that teach German to little kids in India or whatever. Go out, speak with the people, and let us not forget that we are social animals in the end, and that there's a life after that virus and also after that war, and we have to get connected. That's a way more important than anything else. That helped me a lot, and I had good people around me that showed me the value of traveling and going out and meeting new people, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for everybody who gave me the opportunity also to go studying and change my mindset. And I think as well as you, every step to a new city, every step to a new school, to new work, you always learn something. And I'm now in my 30s. There was a lot of shitty stations as well. So in workplace, in personal place, they also belong there. And there's a lot of stuff in your life happening. You can't do anything about it. Learn to deal with it. There's a good episode of your podcast as well, to stoicism, to learn how to deal with stuff in your life. Stay open-minded. That's the way, the most important thing, I think, and stay friendly to each other, because we only have that one life. And I feel better if I go to sleep and I can think about a good day, and that I made it a little bit better. And my biggest approach is, I think it's not because I don't have own kids, but like nephews and nieces, a godfather of little kids. They start to push you also. And I asked myself this question when my nephew was born 3 years ago. What if he asked you when he is 20 and you are 50, what did you do as you realized how the situation is? And that's not my only motivation, but that's a good motivation to get my ass up and do things way faster, like starting last year, getting self-employed, to have more freedom, to have more time to talk about my stuff, and not be in a company issue where you have to think, okay, we are selling concrete and I do wood. So some bosses didn't like that so much. And so get your ass up if you want to take responsibility. And you can always find excuses. But even in the pandemic, we have the chance, or even worldwide, we have the chance via new technologies or via the technologies we have to talk to each other and do that, please.
Wonderful. I love it. And you partially already answered the first of the three questions, but it would be, Paul, what motivated or inspired you in the past week?
The past week. So today is Wednesday. Okay. Motivated. I had a really good call yesterday that we connected 10-year-old partnership that people I met 10 years ago that called again on, I think, Monday and said, hey, I have a big project in Frankfurt and I need somebody with wood and experience on the field. And I was really happy that people still remember 10 years after and say, okay, and that motivated me a lot because the people I work with right now was also very, very positive after that first meeting yesterday and said, oh, really nice guys that you met 10 years ago. Let's make something together. And that were the people that changed me 2012. And I hope they do the same with some more real estate guys in Frankfurt.
That sounds super interesting. I'm crossing fingers for the same. And yeah, it's about connections in the end, personal and business connections. And it's super great if they think of you, and I'm sure they know what they have in you. So good luck for that as well. The second question, Paul, is who are your mentors, or whom do you look up to?
Who do I look up to? In family-wise, I'm really glad that my grandfathers who worked in a fabric with no education after war, and my parents made the next step, made an education, took an A-level, gave us the possibility to study and take the third step after education or school at least. So I'm really grateful. Yeah, got the chances I got as a working child. That's society-based, but also very, very family-based, and everybody worked his ass off on Saturdays and in night shifts, and everybody to make that possible. So that is a huge thing. And then I was in the lucky situation in my studying. I entered a fraternity and met my mentor, which I work with today since 15 years now, and now the first time on eye level perhaps. And he opened me a lot of doors, and he pushed me into studying. And when I had questions, because nobody in my family was studying before, I could call him and ask him, what should I do? And he was always there for me. And in business wise, one I told already is Hubert Romberg, with all the things with sustainability, what he taught me also about being like 10 years and still pushing and pushing. And even if the whole economy says in the whole industry, you're crazy, we don't do that. I'm really happy for him as well, that he is now getting more success, and the industry recognize, okay, he was right 10 years ago and we should have started earlier on the one hand. On the other hand, my first real boss here in Frankfurt that taught me how to do business in real estate and how real estate works. And that's a people business. And he's like, like a friendly version of the Godfather for that. And how society works, how relationship works in that way, which buttons you have to put, and how do you think about projects to make them one. And what's the most inspiring about him is he tries with you doing through the city, and he sees buildings, and then he directly starts to think what he can do about that. And one example, he made that in, I think, 2016 and 17 for a city here in Hassia, and he invented it, and our board said, no, you're going crazy. You can't do that. It's way too much money, blah, blah, blah. Then he got out of the company, sold the ideas to someone else. Now there are 8 new buildings getting built. They start right now with the first, but it was in his head. And then we toured and we discussed a lot in the evenings about that. And that showed me, if you are really sure about something, that's not enough. You need to know the right people. You need to tell the right people. You need to finance it. But in the end, it always starts with a thought. And then you have to get a good team together to put that on the street. So they're family-wise and 3 otherwise. Yeah, definitely. And all people around me that push also very hard in their fields. And I really like to be surrounded by people that take life positively, like you are.
Wonderful. No, absolutely. I sign that. Super cool. And the third and final question, Paul, is what I call 3 truths, or the alien scenario. And imagine that you are traveling in space all by yourself for multiple months, maybe even years. And after quite some travel, you encounter another species, and they can only process 3 facts or thoughts about humanity before they decide they want to get to know us or not. What do you tell them?
Stay home. No. Stay safe. About humanity, 3 things, or can it be 3 sentences?
3 sentences. I mean, it can 3 facts. Mm-hmm.
So it can be true or it can be not true. So everything can be what it is or the opposite. That's one thing. So everybody, everything that you've been told that can be it, but it can be also the opposite. That's one thing about humanity. We can be the nicest guys on the planet as long as we have and share the same interests and don't have the fears from each other. That's a harsh question. I have to get a third thing. Okay, you should bring welcome gifts. That will appreciate and open-minded.
Made from wood.
Made from wood. Be friendly, we will be friendly. Learn English, that's the easiest way to talk to us. And bring new technologies because we can need them.
Wonderful. I love it, Paul. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast and being a very important person in my life as well. So I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Ismail.
If you enjoyed this podcast and learned from it, please feel free to share this episode with a friend or 2, and make sure to subscribe to the Just Another Mindset podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please use the next 10 seconds to give the Just Another Mindset podcast a rating, and know that you will help me to create more meaningful content like this, and also that it will help other people to find this content and get inspired as well. If there is any future topic or guest that you would like to hear more about on the Just Another Mindset podcast, please let me know by leaving a comment on YouTube or sending a mail directly to contact@ishmaelwondergarten.com. And if nobody told you lately, be reminded that you are worthy, you matter, and you can achieve anything.
Do more of what makes you happy. Be yourself. Positive. Change. Just another mindset.